Well, hey there, it's Tim, and you're in the right place. It's Good Seats still available. We have another kind of longish clip here, but again, quintessentially helpful to sort of set the tone for our conversation this week with Dan Joseph. He, the author of a great new book about, the voice. If you're from Pittsburgh, you'll know it well. Give a listen, and we'll see you on the other side.
The Steelers have that terrible time going.
Pro Bobby Tolan.
He was simply the voice of Pittsburgh, a uniter in a city losing its steel mill identity but hanging on to a love for its football team. His journey to beloved hero took a number of twists and turns. Born Myron Sidney Koppelman on January 23, 1929 in Pittsburgh, Myron graduated from Taylor Alderdice High School, then the University of Pittsburgh. His first job was with the Daily Times in Erie.
I started out as a newspaper guy and then as a magazine writer before I ever got into radio and TV accidentally.
Myron spent several years as a freelance writer for publications like the Saturday Evening Post and Sports Illustrated. His profile of Howard Cosell in SI was selected as one of the best 50 articles ever published by the magazine. In 1970, as the Steelers were embarking on a new era, they decided they needed a new voice, albeit a nasally one with a Pittsburgh accent. Myron accepted the job on the condition that he could tell the fans honestly what he thought, and that led to some very colorful opinions.
In those days, you see, broadcasters, almost without exception, rode the fence. So I said, if I'm going to do the games, I got to tell you right now that if the ball club is doing good, I'll be thrilled in the broadcast because I'm a fan, too. I said, if the ball club is doing lousy, stinking up the joint, I'm going to say in the broadcast, these guys are stinking out the joint.
Oh, he had to go up for that football. He had tough single coverage with help coming.
I think that Myron put the color in color analyst, and I think that his style and the way he broadcast the games, the way he interacted with our fans, really, I think, brought our fans closer to the team.
Myron Cope on sports.
How do you got Cope here?
As Myron's popularity escalated, he took on more projects. That voice became a daily staple for sports fans as Myron hosted a sports talk show on WTAE AM 1250.
I wanted to do it just as if I were a kid again with the other kids standing on the corner in front of the neighborhood drugstore arguing about sports.
And that style allowed Myron to become even closer to the fans. It also allowed him to entertain.
Get those Broncos there, just Yonkos.
As the Steelers moved up in the standings, multimedia Myron added television to his resume. It was during one of his legendary commentaries that Myron introduced Pittsburgh to a towel with magical powers.
What is this miracle we behold? What is the textile that rises from the copriscope? Egads, 'tis the terrible towel.
The terrible towel brought opposing teams to their knees and charged a city, but it did much more than that. In 1996, Cope signed over trademark rights for the towel to the Allegheny Valley School, where Cope's son lives along with 900 other mentally challenged residents.
Okay, let's go!
The rise of the Steelers coincided with the rise of Myron Mania, and it seemed as if there was nothing he wouldn't do to entertain the fans.
MC, take it from MC.
Can't touch this.
Of course not. You can bet your green weenie you can't.
Can't touch this.
Bobby Bow, you put on a show. Take a Bobby Bow over 2 Ho-Chos. You can't touch this. Don't tell your heart, your breaky heart. The towel's coming back with miracles. The news I'll give him a start. He'll go crazy and fall apart and buy every other towel at the Kmart.
One unforgettable stunt Myron pulled off was this swim in the Mon River.
I'll tell you, that Monongahela, that filth in there, it's foul. So what I need to clean me off is a terrible towel.
Well, we happen to have one just like that right here. Right there, a terrible towel. King of the promos, yes.
After a series of medical setbacks, including throat surgery, Myron was left with a big decision in the summer of 2005. After 35 years, he decided to retire from the broadcast booth. A decision he said was an easy one after a short conversation with friend and former Steelers PR director Joe Gordon.
I had many times told him that if he ever detected me slipping in the broadcast booth, losing a step, he should tell me.
and that I would retire.
A month after he retired, Myron joined many of the super Steelers of the 70s when he was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. As much as Pittsburgh idolized Myron, no one loved him like his wife Mildred, the one person who truly served as his inspiration.
I've been around a lot of guys who are heroes to many people, but I'll have to make this real short. I ain't got no heroes. I got a heroine. Her name's Mildred. She's sitting down there.
Mildred Cope died in 1994 after a long battle with cancer, a loss which devastated her husband. After she was gone and Myron battled health problems of his own, Mildred was still the one Myron looked to for help.
She was a remarkable woman. But yeah, I've asked her for help a few times during these trials, if you will, and she's come through.
And Myron Cope always came through for the fans of Pittsburgh, fans he loved as much as they loved him.
It's been so much fun, and this reminds me of great moments that I've enjoyed. And hey, how you gonna beat it?
Welcome to Good Seats Still Available, a curious little podcast devoted to exploring what used to be in professional sports. Here's your host, Tim Hanlon.
Well, yoy, double yoy, and maybe even a triple yoy for you all there out there. How are you? It's Tim Hanlon. It is Good Seats Still Available, the curious little podcast that is devoted to what used to be in professional sports. Thank you for finding us. We appreciate it. And if you're from Pittsburgh, this is a long overdue conversation around a legendary voice that is still reverberates today, still a very cherished one in Pittsburgh sports circles. Lots of different sports there in the Steel City, but probably most remembered for his witticisms and commentary during his many years in the booth, calling and providing color commentary for the Pittsburgh Steelers of the NFL. And the story, of course, is around the life and times of Myron Cope, a legendary Steelers broadcaster, but a fixture in Pittsburgh sports and, frankly, national sports for quite some time. A well-regarded magazine journalist for Sports Illustrated and the like, and made an interesting conversion back in the late 1960s to become perhaps the most unwitting and most beloved sports broadcasters of his generation in Pittsburgh, regionally around that area, and on a number of occasions on the national front as well. And we're excited to have the author of the life and times story of Myron Cope. His name is Dan Joseph. And the book is an amazing one and a real revelation to somebody like me who grew up on the East Coast, the New York City metropolitan area, which prides itself as being sort of the media capital of the United States, if not the world. And this Pittsburgh broadcasting thing, and Myron Cope was sort of an interesting, I guess, a side thing that I was kind of generally aware of, but not sort of intimately. But man, you talk to somebody who's from Pittsburgh or from the area, grew up there, listening to Steelers games, or even just the commentaries on WTA television, from which that clip was pulled as a memorial to him a number of years back. Myron Cope is just legendary. And we're going to get into sort of the reasons why, some of the things that he did, he was known for, and clearly also somebody who enjoyed poking fun at himself, but also a very literate guy. This is a guy who, like I said earlier, came out of long-form magazine journalism and was a very good writer, knew the language really well of English, and but probably was most remembered for some of his phrases that he would just bark out with his sort of, one-of-a-kind, scratchy, raspy voice, with phrases like yoy or okle-dokle, or, he even famously claimed that his was the voice that wasn't that of a broadcaster, but one more that cut through concrete. And I don't think he was kidding around there. But boy, he certainly liked the kid. He had an evening talk show on the radio. He did one of the first sports talk programs in the country on the radio. Dominated his time slot. He did television commentaries. He would show up at other Pittsburgh sports team broadcasts. And also, perhaps unbeknownst to most people out there in the general sports landscape, was the creator of the famed Terrible Towel. So if you don't even know what that is, well, stay tuned, because we're going to get into all of that stuff. The story of Myron Cope, the legendary Pittsburgh Steelers and more broadcaster, and the inventor, and the progenitor of the Terrible Towel. Coming up with Dan Joseph in just a moment's time. You will love this conversation, and you will love the book, of course. It is called Behind the Yoi. That's Y-O-I, to those who are not familiar with Yiddish. Behind the Yoi, the life of Myron Cope, legendary Pittsburgh Steelers broadcaster. It is out now. It's been out for a couple of weeks. It is published by our friends at the University of Nebraska Press, and you can get yourself a copy in hardcover form or in Kindle version by going to our website at goodseatsstillavailable.com. Just search up this episode number 367 with Dan Joseph, and you will find a convenient link to said book or Kindle version of such, and we'll get a couple of shekels of referral love. We appreciate when you do that. Well, let's not waste any more time. Okay, let's get into it. Here's our chat that we had just a couple of weeks back with Dan, and let's talk about Myron Cope, shall we? Here it is. Please, as always, enjoy. So you're a native Pittsburgh resident, right? And you since left, but maybe you can give our people a sense who are not from the area, just how pervasive the voice of Myron Cope was, his presence, and frankly, maybe a little bit of background about him, because this is a guy who, and I was really unfamiliar. I'm from the New York area, so very little knowledge, know of the guy, not very deeply, but what a story. This guy was a true journalist in the beginning, right? He was not a broadcaster by trade by any means.
No. He was actually one of the nation's top magazine sports writers for many years. He wrote he's mainly remembered for writing for Sports Illustrated, but he wrote for The Sporting News and Sport Magazine and Life and Look and the Saturday Evening Post and all these others. He had a niche for covering, he called himself the nut specialist, and he was really good at doing personality profiles of who were a little bit unusual. And, sports journalism, at least, until the 60s, was very much focused on kind of idolizing top athletes. And he did some of that too. He did superstars. He profiled superstars like Muhammad Ali and Jerry West and Jim Brown and I can't remember some of the others, many others. But really his niche and his specialty was these great personality profiles. Very successful at doing that for years. Before that, he had been a journalist in Pittsburgh working for the one of the local newspapers. He always wanted to be. He was one of those people, and I'm like this. He always wanted to be a writer from the time he was a kid, and he just plunged right into it when he got to college and at the University of Pittsburgh, and then got a job right out of college. And he was a local sports writer until he got ambitious and started writing for the magazines. His first big strike in the magazine business was writing about various Pittsburgh Pirates players. He had a talent for kind of bringing out the interesting side of the players. And when the 1960 Pirates won the World Series, that was a big bonanza for him. He did personality profiles not only on like Roberto Clemente, the big stars, but also, the less remembered guys, Dick Stewart, the first baseman, and Elroy Face, the pitcher, and Danny Murtaugh, the manager. You could do a whole book on his profiles of the 1960 Pirates.
So he was a long form guy. I mean, this is back in the magazine days, and parenthetically, I also did an internship one summer in college at Sports Illustrated, but I digress. He was kind of sort of dyed in the wool magazine long form journalist after a while. He was basically freelancing for some of the top magazine titles of the era, right?
Yes, yeah, he was long form guy. Although he could write on deadline, like a good newspaper reporter should. His very last assignment for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette was Game 7 of the 1960 World Series, where Bill Mazeroski hit the home run to win in the bottom of the ninth. But he gravitated to long form magazine writing, and by 1962 he won, I think it's called the E.F. Dutton Prize for like the best magazine sports writing in the nation. And he was getting big bucks for doing this. He was getting $3,000, $4,000 a pop in 1960s money, which was, that could buy you a new car back then. And he was doing that, probably 10 times a year. So he was very successful, and he never dreamed of becoming a broadcaster until, he got a phone call.
Well, let's describe that a little bit. Again, keep in mind the majority of our listeners probably just did not have the luxury of growing up and experiencing the Myron Cope story and his many years of broadcasting Steelers games and some of the other stuff we'll get to. But how does a guy like this with a nationally acclaimed writing career in sports, how and frankly, to be determined later, a voice, I don't know if he has a voice for radio, right? What's the antithesis of that? Not somebody you would confuse with somebody ready for the dulcet tones, not a term you would normally put against this guy. How does this unlikely pairing of him and broadcasting occur to start?
There was a radio station in Pittsburgh, 1250 AM WTAE. And they were, for years, they were, ironically, the beautiful music station in Pittsburgh. And then they decided they're going to go more middle of the road, and that included sports. So they wanted to build a sports image. They called Myron at the beginning of 1968 and said, "Hey, would you like to do some commentaries?" Myron, his voice is, as you said, the antithesis of a broadcasting voice. I compare it to a scouring pad. It's rough. It's piercing. It's loud. But he gave it a try. And
I'm sorry, and probably
he always said that, they
no, and probably because, right, he's probably, I don't know, he's the dean of sports journalists in the city or in the region, right? But he's well known as a sports writer with real chops, right? So this is not an illogical ask, right?
Right. Yeah, he was well known for being plugged in to the national sports scene and the local sports scene. He was an opinionated guy. Actually, he was well known for giving his sports opinions at a local bar. There was a bar in Pittsburgh called Dante's, and he used to hang out with the Steelers in those days. And somebody said, the manager of this station, WT, said, you come highly recommended by the people who drink with you. So he decided to give this a try. He went on the air, and he thought at first, he was broadcasting from his basement at home. They had set up a microphone there, and he didn't believe that people could hear him. So he began shouting everything. He began, he had this, like I said, loud, rough, grating voice, and he began shouting at the top of his lungs all his commentaries. And he always joked that on his first day on the air, that people called the station and said, "Get that man off the air. I can't stand that voice." But in reality, they liked him from the start, and soon he was doing 2 commentaries a day, and then they put him on TV, and the ball started rolling.
Well, so what was it? I mean, was it his mastery of the language, his ability to tell stories from the written page into, it's not everybody that can make that leap, from the written word to the spoken narrative, regardless of the voice, right? I mean, it's still a talent to be able to tell a story, theater of the mind, writing a 3-minute or 2-minute opinion kind of thing for a broadcast versus something that has more the luxury of words on a written page.
He was smart enough from the start to realize that what worked for magazine writing wouldn't work for radio writing. And he adjusted his style to be more informal and left room to improvise a little bit. But he was an expert at being kind of of making the theater of the mind. He was very, very good at painting a picture for the radio audience, and he had, and his voice, as unusual and as loud and as rough as it was, he had intelligent things to say. So the content really is what drove him, what made him a success. People liked the points that he was making. It wasn't just as he said, it wasn't just barroom commentary. People saying, he should have done this and he should have done that. He actually would make an argument about if Joe Green, for instance, the Steelers defensive tackle, he would try to put him in historical perspective compared to other defensive linemen before. It wasn't just hey, I think this kid is great kind of commentary.
So he's doing general sports commentary, right? What specifically got him into the Steelers booth at the time, say versus the Pirates or the Penguins or Pitt football and that kind of stuff?
He started out doing, he started out doing general sports commentary, but his interest was always the Steelers. As far back as the early 50s, he had been hanging out at the Steelers offices. And when it came time, when the Steelers were in 1970, the Steelers were doing a complete top to bottom overhaul of the organization. They were keeping draft choices instead of trading them away for the first time. They were moving into Three Rivers Stadium. They had hired Chuck Noll as the coach, and they wanted a new color commentator. And somebody suggested Myron be the guy because he was already becoming so popular with the commentaries. And he agreed to give it a try. And it clicked pretty well with the play-by-play announcer, a guy named Jack Fleming. The only thing is Myron had to learn when to stop talking. He had this tendency to just, run right over the play-by-play comment, the announcing. So he always said it took about 5 years for him to learn to work with Jack Fleming, but he got better and better as time went on. It's funny, if you listen to early Cope on YouTube, you can tell he's trying to restrain himself. He's trying to keep his comments short so he doesn't piss off his partner. But then as time goes on, you can see him getting more animated and claiming more airtime and becoming this character that Steeler fans came to know and cherish.
What's the shtick? What's the how is he growing into this role, and how does somebody like Jack Fleming, who's doing the play-by-play, how do they feel each other out, so to speak? I mean, and who's doing more of the feeling, shall we say?
But Jack Fleming, he was an old pro at broadcasting. He had been doing play-by-play since the 40s. And he wasn't used to working with somebody this excitable and this loud and with such a penetrating voice. And like I said, for the first 5 years, they're kind of just learning how to work with each other. But from the start, it was a good mix and match. Fleming had a low voice. Myron Cope had kind of a high voice. So it's very easy for listeners to tell who's who. And they were both funny guys. Neither one of them took it too seriously. And Jack Fleming recognized over time that Myron was special. He was the people loved him. It was 1972 where the Steelers took off, because that's when Franco Harris joined the team, and the fans suddenly began forming these fan clubs like Franco's Italian Army.
One reason I'll never forget the Immaculate Reception is that it could have cost me my job. You see, Franco Harris had a great fan club that called itself Franco's Italian Army. Now, as you can see, Frank Sinatra was inducted into Franco's Italian Army as a one-star general. So, okay, after Franco made his miracle catch, he was resting at his locker when a club official brought him a telegram. It said, "Go Steelers, go," and was signed General Francis Sinatra. So I said, hey, I got to tell our radio listeners about that. I knew that WTAE Radio had a 5 o'clock newscast just underway, so I grabbed a locker room telephone and dialed the newsroom and said, put me into the newscast live. And the guy in the newsroom said, okay, stand by. So I stood by, waiting for the newscaster to say, here's Myron Cope from Three River Stadium. But I heard nothing. I'm looking at my watch and I saw that the 5-minute newscast was just about over. I'm totally frustrated. So I uttered a terrible and awful expletive. And wouldn't you know it, I was on the air. Outside, the roads, they were jammed, and I'm told that my terrible words, my expletive, caused at least half a dozen fender benders. At any rate, Monday morning, I was summoned to meet with 2 radio executives. They informed me that the big boss, the man in charge of the whole radio and television operation combined, was going up the wall. They also informed me that under FCC regulations, the possible penalties for what I'd done were a fine of up to $10,000 and a jail term of up to 2 years. To which I said, who does the 2 years, me or the big boss? And the answer was, the big boss. So I said, good, I'll send him a fruitcake. Well, as matters turned out, nobody got fined or jailed, and 10 years later, I'm still working here. Or at least I think I am. Big boss, if you're listening, you do appreciate my willingness to send you a fruitcake, don't you?
And Jurella's Gorillas, that was celebrating the kicker, Roy Jurella. Now, there's no social media back then, obviously. If you wanted to publicize one of your clubs, you had to find an outlet. So you needed to find someone who would do it for you. And the fans came to Myron. He would do it in his commentaries, and sometimes he would do it during the game. And he made fans even more excited. The Steelers were winning, so that was exciting itself, but he made it extra special, connecting the fans to the team and highlighting the players' personalities and quirks. I've been thinking about how to describe this. The fans would have been excited about a team that won 4 Super Bowls anyway, but Myron took that fan passion and he amplified it, he multiplied it, and it became, by the end of the decade, it wasn't just a fan base, it was Steeler Nation. It was an especially passionate fan base. And he changed Pittsburgh from a baseball town to a football town. Not him alone, him and the players. But I think, I quoted somebody in the book who said, the Steelers would have captured Pittsburgh anyway, but with Myron, it happened more completely and more quickly.
Well, and Fleming was a pro, right? I mean, this was a guy who was like a long time calling West Virginia college football and
yes.
sports for many years. He had before Cope joined the booth. He was calling the Steelers games for at least 5 or so seasons. He was even in Chicago Bulls lore in the 70s, both the early part and for a couple of years there near I think 78, 79. So, I mean, a pro, right, who knows probably better when to lay out, so to speak, and maybe know when to kind of needle his color commentator to kind of step up and bring some of that unvarnished enthusiasm, shall we say, to the booth?
Well, unvarnished is a good word. But Myron broadcast Steeler games for 35 years, and never did he acquire an ounce of varnish. He was always high-spirited, high-volume, kind of off-the-cuff commentary. He had his own vocabulary. He would shout "yoy" if he was really excited, if the Steelers did something well, and if it was extra good, it would be double yoy, or very, very occasionally triple yoy. And he had these other expressions that sounded vaguely Yiddish, but weren't really. They were his own personal lingo. Okle-dokle was one. Ha was another. That was his placeholder word when he couldn't think of what he wanted to say. He would say zounds and or some of the others. When he wanted to dismiss something, he would say that's a lot of gargonzola. And he would go into these rants when like the Steelers scored a touchdown in the Super Bowl, for example. You were Rocky Blair. He jumped up there like some sort of Russian high jumper. Here, Terry Bradshaw be throwing a pass, and Myron would say, Here, Rocky Blair, play Lynn Swan for a minute, to describe how high Rocky had jumped. Uh, and he would say the terrible towel. Once the terrible towel was invented, he was really off to the races. He would say the terrible towel is wiping him out. It's a massacre. It's as if the Steelers and the terrible towel, as if the terrible towel had given the Steelers superhuman strength to leap 8 feet in the air to catch a touchdown or whatever. And it was very, very entertaining. And Steeler fans, a lot of them, like around 50%, would turn down the sound on the TV and listen to Jack Fleming and Myron Cope call it on the radio, even though the TV picture and the radio sound were sometimes out of sync. People didn't care. They had to hear Myron call the game.
And what was it? I mean, he's like a wacky uncle with some intelligence, an armchair sort of. I mean, clearly, it sounds like all he's doing is his barroom, shenanigans on the radio, and almost sort of, not caring, if you will, if those are going beyond just the a handful of folks sharing a drink with him, right? It's almost like everybody's at the bar.
No, yeah, well, I mean, there was a little bit of that, but he knew football. He was intelligent. He could make intelligent analysis of what was happening on the field, not to the same extent that a former player could. He couldn't, describe the blocking techniques or whatever, but he could give listeners an idea of what had happened on each play and why it might have happened. And when it was an intense situation, like a late game drive to win the game, he actually did bear down and get semi-serious and actually help call the action with Jack Fleming. Wacky. There was the wacky uncle aspect to it, but it was an intelligent wacky uncle, and he did know when to take it more seriously.
And he clearly endeared himself to fans. I mean, but so unique, right? I mean, this is nicknames. He was pretty prodigious with nicknames, doling out to various players. You want to maybe throw a few that maybe even our general audience outside the Pittsburgh area might even know about?
Oh, sure. He loved nicknames. The most famous one being Jerome Bettis, who he nicknamed the Bus. He didn't originate the nickname, but he heard it from someone and immediately applied it, and it fit perfectly. Players, Jack Lambert was Jack Splat for the way he hit people. Cordell Stewart was Slash because of his ability to play both quarterback and receiver, and I think do punt returns. L.C. Greenwood was Gold Shoes because Greenwood was like one of the first players in the NFL to wear, not white or black shoes. He would dye them gold. Rocky Blyer became the Rock. Or some of the others. I think Donnie Shell
he had some nicknames for some of the teams too, right?
Yes, I was getting to that. The best one being the Cincinnati Bengals, who he dubbed the Bungles, and he used with glee many, many times on the air. The Cleveland Browns became the Cleve Brownies. The Washington Redskins, for years he thought they were doing dirty play, so he called them the Dirty Skins. And then he started calling them the Red Faces the year that they signed like $100 million worth of players and couldn't make the playoffs. He was always anybody named George would become Georgie Porgy. Chuck Noll, he called him Chaz. Chaz, I guess, being a very old, common nickname for anyone named Charles. And then he dubbed him the Emperor after the Steelers won the 4 Super Bowls. He was just but sometimes he struck out. Sometimes nicknames didn't quite catch on. We all know the Steel Curtain, the Steelers defense in the 70s, but that was not Myron's initial name for that. Do you want to take a guess what Myron wanted to call that defense?
Jeez, I have no clue.
He wanted to call it the Anvil Chorus.
That's great.
Which is, he picked it's like from an 1850s opera of some kind, and he thought like Dwight White and Joe Green and L.C. Greenwood reminded him of blacksmiths with hammers and anvils. And he actually, there's a song, And he had the Steeler band. Back then, they had a live band who would play during the games, and he would have the band play this theme every time the Steelers sacked somebody, but it went right over the heads of everybody. It just like didn't gain any traction at all. So he wasn't perfect with the nicknames, but
a little erudite for the fan base, I guess. But still, I mean, this is a guy who's a writer, right? And a writer writes, and he knows he's got he's not just an empty voice behind a mic, right? So he's got to be given some leeway to some pearls of wisdom in front of the unwashed masses, so to speak.
Yes, yes.
So but he also but he played up he had a comic persona, right? He wasn't sort of, I mean, listening to a Myron Cope do his commentary in game and even off, when he was doing commentaries and stuff, he laid into he knew he was in on his persona / joke, right?
Yes. He wasn't that way off the air. I compare him now. This might go over a lot of people's heads, but I'm going to say it anyway. There was an old radio comedian named Jack Benny. And Jack Benny was like the most popular comedian in old-time radio from like 30s, 40s, 50s. And he had this whole persona of being very cheap, very vain, very pompous. And people would think he was that way in real life. But he was the opposite in real life. It was just a character he was playing. And Myron, it was kind of the same thing. Over a period of years, he built up this persona of being certainly talking very loudly and being very excitable and a little bit, like an attention whore almost. He always looked to make himself the show. And of course, promoting the terrible towel constantly. But no, in real life, he wasn't anything like that. He was some people said he was almost soft-spoken off the air. His voice was that was his real voice, but he talked at a normal volume off the air. And he did not walk around saying yoy and okle-dokle and double yoy and things like that. People used to think, well, maybe he was like that as a kid. But one of the things I found in writing this book was that he wasn't. I mean, this was a persona that he developed only after he went on radio and TV. Even during his writing years, he wasn't like that at all. It was an outgrowth of being a media personality
and a local celebrity pretty quickly at that, right? I mean, obviously he was well known for his writings beforehand, but he kind of, I wouldn't call him sort of a phenomenon, but I think people pretty quickly kind of, you mentioned it before. I mean, it's the old turning off the TV and listening to the radio kind of thing. I mean, which people were doing, for example, nationally with Monday Night Football. They would turn on the CBS radio broadcast with Hank Stram and Jack Buck because they couldn't take Howard Cosell, right? So that was a thing. And maybe Pittsburgh was the one giving the national audience that idea to do that with Monday Night Football. But his was in reverse, right? Because it sounded like you wanted to hear what he had to say, because even if it was a dog of a game, he was going to make it interesting.
Yes, and he was similar to Howard Cosell in that way at a local level. People would keep listening to the game because he made it interesting, even if the Steelers were getting blown out. And actually, people liked him better than they liked Howard Cosell. Howard Cosell was famous. You either hated him or you loved him. In Pittsburgh, most people loved Myron Cope. There were some people who couldn't stand the sound of his voice. It was just so piercing. But I would say 90% loved him. And he became a local media star. He did dozens upon dozens of commercials. He would be hosting, nights for various clubs and lodges and giving speeches. He could have worked 7 days a week if he had wanted to.
It's interesting though, because given that writing background, right, and award-winning at that for his journalistic efforts and stuff, it's interesting because all the clips that I've heard and the background, obviously, in this book, and he was probably the definition of what a homer was, right, and adding a whole bunch of lexicon to it as well, right. I'm sure he was Let's put it this way. He wasn't sort of being journalistically objective in the booth, right? It was almost the opposite of that, which is surprising for somebody given his journalistic background.
Not entirely. He was a homer. He cheered for the Steelers. He wasn't being neutral. He wasn't being the outside broadcaster dropping in from above to broadcast this one game. He was rooting for the Steelers, no doubt about it, but he would criticize the players. I found clips of him, 1974, John Stallworth, the Steelers' future Hall of Fame receiver. He kept dropping passes. And Myron on the air said, well, that's like the third time today he dropped a pass. Well, the Steelers ought to think about trading him. He didn't hold back on criticizing players. He would say that guy stunk out the joint. That was one of his favorite phrases. He was a homer, but it was a homer with some integrity. 1979 AFC Championship, when the Houston Oilers, Mike Renfro, this gets played a lot. The Oilers threw it to Renfro. He caught it at the sort of the edge of the end zone, and the refs ruled it out of bounds. But when you watch the replay, he was clearly in, and the Oilers should have had a touchdown in that AFC Championship game. And Myron on the air said, "Hey, that's a touchdown. I got to call it. I got to say what I'm seeing. That's a touchdown." And it was interesting because Jack Fleming, the other Steelers announcer, he was being very neutral. He couldn't admit on the air that the refs had blown the call and that the Oilers should have scored. But Myron, he had integrity. He wasn't a blind rooter.
Very interesting. All right, so let's get into this terrible towel saga, because I think this is something that everybody who's a football fan of a certain age, even today, right? It's still, the legacy still lives on. And it's brought back on occasion. I don't even know if it ever went away, but a little bit of an origin story about what this thing called the terrible towel was, and where did Cope come into this mixing bowl?
Okay, so Steelers in 1975, they were about to host a playoff game against the Baltimore Colts. And the station management went to Myron and said, "Hey, we'd like you to come up with a gimmick to get the fans more involved." Oh, as if the fans weren't already heavily involved anyway, but that's a different story. So Myron and the station manager and a sales guy, they had a meeting, and they were trying to think of, what can we do? There had been some other, the Miami Dolphins had what they called, their fans just waved hankies, white handkerchiefs before that. So this wasn't coming totally out of nowhere. But Myron, the sales guy, a guy named Larry Garrett, said, "Hey, well, they could wave towels." And that set off a light bulb in Myron's head. "Hey, we could call it the terrible towel." And people could wave it in the stands, and it has practical uses. They could put it on their head when it rains, or keep themselves warm. So he started promoting it on his radio show and on TV. And the origin story is that 30,000 fans showed up with towels and waved the Steelers on to victory. I'm not sure if it was really 30,000 or not, but that's what everyone seems to say. So, okay. And for the next 2 or 3 years, it was just sort of a fun do-it-yourself thing. Any old towel would do, any gold towel. It had to be gold or black or gold, but most of them were gold. And then a local department store came to Myron and said, "Why don't we sell these? We'll create a logo and we'll sell it in the stores." And instantly it took off. People began buying them in huge numbers, and an official terrible towel was born. And now the interesting thing here is that Myron, now he got a royalty on these towels, but almost immediately he began giving large amounts of money to charity from his royalties. Myron's son, Danny, was born severely autistic and with brain damage, and has spent his whole life in a home for people with disabilities. So Myron began devoting a lot of the royalties to the school that his son was in. And years later, Myron officially handed over all of the royalties to this school, the Allegheny Valley School. One of the things that struck me in writing this book was that Myron gave up a lot to do this. He gave it most of it away. He kept some, for himself in the early years, but eventually he gave it all away. He was a very generous kind of guy. As far as the Steelers fans went, for a year and a half when the Steelers won the Super Bowl in 78 and 79, they bought the towel in huge numbers. But then when the Steelers dynasty ended, they stopped buying the towel very abruptly. And the towel did go away for a period of about 10 or 15 years. But Myron never really stopped promoting it. And then it came back during the Bill Cowher era when they finally got back to the Super Bowl.
Well, you mentioned this in late 75 as a playoff game. It wasn't I guess it wasn't guaranteed to be a success, right? I mean, he was promoting this on his radio show, and it was, like you said, DIY at the time. But I mean, was he worried that he was, going to be made to look kind of foolish when people didn't sort of take him up on it or know what to really do about it and stuff? Because I think, by all accounts, it seems like he and everybody were quite surprised at just how quickly it kind of took off that game and onward.
Yeah, they were surprised. He faced a little resistance from the Steelers themselves, who thought this was stupid. Andy Russell, the linebacker, said, "Hey, what's all this crap about a towel?" But then in that first game where the towel was flying, Andy Russell picked up a fumble and ran it 93 yards for a touchdown. So that, to Myron, that was proof that the towel was destined to be a success. And he was surprised that so many people picked it up with such enthusiasm. But he gloried in it. And once he saw it was a success, he developed a whole personality for the towel. He insisted that the towel was a guy. He said it had to be, it was he. It wasn't it was he. And it ate breakfast before games on Sundays. And he later on, he called himself the high priest of the towel. It's funny, I have an interview with him when the towel reached age 21. He said the towel's now ready to go down the street and get a beer.
Popular sales and stuff. So this was a local store. Was it Gimbals? It was Gimbals, right?
Gimbals, yes.
Are
you familiar with Gimbals?
Well, sure, because I grew up in the New York area. So Gimbals, Macy's, A&S, all those stores.
Yeah.
Sure. But there was other stuff too. It wasn't just the towels. I mean, there was almost a line of stuff, right? I'm sure
there was.
All that stuff, right?
You'd walk into a Gimbal store in Pittsburgh, and they had a whole room set aside for quote unquote terrible merchandise. There would be terrible baby bibs. There would be terrible shot glasses, terrible ashtrays. This during the smoking era. There would be terrible T-shirts and terrible shorts, and all sorts of terrible paraphernalia. And you can still get all that stuff today.
So this was Gimbals. I guess they outsourced this. This was only available at Gimbals, which is obviously a brilliant promotion because you can only get it there. And I'm guessing they outsourced it to various towel manufacturers and all those other kinds of things and stuff. I have to think though that after a certain point there had to be these copycats and unlicensed rogue materials out there. No.
Yeah, well, see, now Myron wound up, I was telling you that with the royalties, he gave a lot to charity, but he also gave a lot to lawyers because at the time, the Steelers weren't involved. The NFL wasn't involved in marketing the towel. They weren't, no one was protecting the trademark except for Myron himself, basically. So he had lawyers going around to various establishments in the Pittsburgh area, serving letters, cease and desist letters to these, like, it would be like a bakery would be making terrible towel cakes, and they got a letter from the lawyer, and a novelty shop was selling the towel. They got a letter from the lawyer. There were, a lot of knockoffs, at least at first, and I think that persisted for many years until the Steelers themselves took over the trademark, and now I never see a fake terrible towel. It's always Myron Cope's official terrible towel, but they produce like 50 different versions of it for different occasions.
And significant money has been raised over that time, right?
Yes, about $8 million for the charity, but then the Steelers themselves now have raked in many millions beyond that. I don't know what it would be. I can tell you that at various times Myron was getting monthly royalty checks for like $20,000, which was huge money back then. Just based on towel sales. It really became the flag of Steelers Nation. It became part of the team's culture very quickly, and people began taking it to unusual locations. Like some guy planted it at the South Pole, and another one took it to the top of Mount Everest, and 3 astronauts have taken it up to the International Space Station.
That's crazy. Has the team followed through with similar charitable tributaries from these sales, or do we not know?
I don't really know, but I guess it's like, I don't know, 10% or 15% go to this home, the Allegheny Valley School for People with Disabilities, where Danny Cope, Myron's son, lives to this day. He's 55 now or so. He's been there for over 40 years, but he needs to be. He's nonverbal. He can't function as an adult. Yeah, but I think that's one of the reasons the towel became so popular. It's because people know that it's for a good cause.
I think many people outside the Pittsburgh area didn't even know of this Myron Cope guy until the terrible towel. And then he really kind of he had sort of gained sort of this cult status around the league, to the point where like NFL Films was like doing specials on the guy.
Yeah, I mean it is kind of a cult. The cult of the terrible towel and the cult of Myron Cope himself. His ratings in Pittsburgh were fantastic, especially he was on this little 5,000-watt radio station, but he was getting the same ratings as the 50,000-watt station. And I think especially when the steel industry collapsed in Pittsburgh at the beginning of the 80s, and Pittsburghers began moving all over the country to find jobs, they took Myron Cope with them in many ways. And that's how Steeler Nation became not just a Pittsburgh thing, it became a national thing. And I think more and more people heard about what Myron was doing, and that, of course, caught the attention of the NFL. And so NFL Films would do segments on him, and like Bob Costas would do segments on him during the NBC pregame show. And he became a legend without ever leaving Pittsburgh. People sometimes would ask him, "Why don't you leave Pittsburgh?" But he was very comfortable there and very beloved. And his shtick might not have translated all that well to other cities. Maybe it could have worked in New York, but I think a lot of other cities, people would have looked at him and said, "What are you doing?"
So Cope was a legend in town, right? And upon his passing, right? I mean, I saw footage on YouTube, right? I mean, it's snowing and sleeting and stuff, and there are hundreds of people showing up with these terrible towels for his memorial service. I mean, part of the fabric of Pittsburgh media and sports and the Steelers, right?
Oh, yes. It was actually, I wouldn't say it wasn't really a somber occasion when he died, because his friends said, "Hey, don't be mournful about this. You know, this is a man who loved life. Go out and celebrate, have a drink." And there was a regular funeral service, but in the downtown Pittsburgh on a really cold, snowy day, they're all standing there in the wind and the snow, waving the terrible towels in total silence. And I think it was a perfect tribute.
What do you think his legacy was? Because besides the terrible towel, I mean, he's still remembered and revered. Any other were there memorials and stuff? Like, are there places in the press box in Heinz Field or any other sort of semblances of nooks and crannies that he inhabited that have a plaque or something attached to them? Terrible towels anywhere?
Strangely enough, there are no like physical sites. But there are several tributes that you can see that you're bound to encounter if you live there or spend time there. Uh, at funerals, many Pittsburghers have terrible towels buried with them. I've seen it dropped into people's coffins. His daughter, Elizabeth, tells me that sometimes people will leave a terrible towel on his grave. That's how deep the connection goes. And that I don't know how you could better describe that this man has left a legacy for Steeler fans and the people of Pittsburgh. And there were other tributes as well. Somebody named an asteroid after Myron. And when that happened, the Post-Gazette, the paper, joked that if it ever hit Earth, it would land on Cleveland.
That's perfect and great. That's hilarious. What do you ascribe his success for such a long time, his longevity and his connection with the fans and the town, the city? Like, what was it? What was the special charm? And was he folksy? Was he accessible to the fan? Was he kind of the common man, so to speak? And
He was, yeah, he was accessible to the fan. He wasn't like, secreted away somewhere. He got out. People knew him. Ultimately, what it came down to, though, I think, was he was kind of charismatic. He had kind of an electric personality, and he was very creative. The Terrible Towel being one creation, but if you listen to his commentaries, and we have a Myron Cope YouTube channel. It's called the official Myron Cope channel. You can listen to he would compose songs, so to speak, although he couldn't sing, which was part of the charm, part of the humor. And he was just a really funny guy and a really spirited guy, and people liked him. He had that knack for creating a connection with, especially with somebody in the radio audience, which is not an easy thing to do. You're a disembodied voice over the radio, but people love that voice and they love what it said. He really was one of the greatest broadcasters, certainly the city of Pittsburgh ever saw, and maybe one of the best that the sports world ever saw.
And I guess he is about as close to the Hall of Fame with pro football, with the Pete Rozelle Radio Television Award, right? Is that a Pro Football Hall of Fame thing, or is that an NFL thing, or is it both?
I think it is Pro Football Hall of Fame. I think he's in the National Radio Hall of Fame, and I think I mean he's not obviously you can't I guess he's in the equivalent
it's essentially the equivalent of the Ford
broadcasters wing of the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I think it's the official. It's kind of the parallel to the Ford Frick Award for baseball.
Yeah, it's he was considered an essential part of those 70s team, especially the Steelers in the whole time he was there, but especially those 70s teams. He was really close to those players. And when those players were honored, Myron would often be honored at the same time. He was almost considered part and parcel of those teams.
All right, last question for me. Were there any other sports that he was either asked to do, considered to do, he maybe wanted to do, or was it not even a conversation given his just connection with the Steelers?
I think given his connection with the Steelers, he was never. When the Pirates fired Bob Prince in 1975, Bob Prince he'd been the Pirate announcer for like 27 years, and he himself was a very charismatic and popular announcer. Some people thought it would be a good idea to bring Myron Cope in to do Pirate broadcasts, but it's really hard to picture Myron. He was he had too much energy to do baseball. You couldn't shout "yoy" after hitting a 2-run single, and the only other sport he ever really announced, actually, he was the ring announcer for a heavyweight boxing title fight. In 1981, Larry Holmes fought Ronaldo Snipes in Pittsburgh, and Don King asked Myron to be the ring announcer. And you know what? He was perfect for that. He could let his whole personality fly in the ring. and the fans loved it. And Howard Cosell, if you listen to the tape, Howard Cosell was chuckling at this. He knew Myron Cope pretty well, and he thought Myron was living a childhood dream in doing this. That I think that's the only other sporting event that he ever broadcast, though.
I don't know. I kind of think it would have been interesting to hear him call a Pittsburgh Triangles World Team tennis match, or maybe a Pittsburgh Spirit soccer game. But that's just me.
Yeah, it would have been fun to hear him do a golf match, a PGA championship. I think that wasn't going to happen. But he could have done horse racing. He had a voice that would have sounded really good coming out of a speaker, at a horse track. But no, football was his natural home. He found the right sport. He found the perfect role for himself.
All right, last question for you specifically. Why this book? Because and again, I'm not asking as a Pittsburgh native, right? But it seems to me like if I had grown up in Pittsburgh, you would have said, what took so long for a book like this?
Well, Myron did write a memoir when he was alive, and it's well written, it's good, but his daughter kept all these papers and tapes and artifacts of his career. And when I learned that she had a list, I thought there's got to be more to the story. And with her permission, I kind of dove into all this stuff and learned a lot of details about Myron's life that had never been told before. And so I thought there needs to be a full book written by an outsider. And Myron, he kept his whole career in very good order in terms of archiving it. So I almost think he wanted somebody else to come back and write another book at some point.
Well, it is an enlightening read, and for somebody who's an NFL fan of a certain age, and not really having, aside from a passing knowledge of him, and certainly the terrible towel, it really is a great education in other cities and the culture of the NFL, and this guy who's probably unique of a breed that maybe won't see the likes of any ever more.
There weren't that many, even in the old days, there weren't that many either play-by-play guys or analysts who were like Myron, who came from a writing background and who had never played football. He was too small to play football. You have to understand. Myron was 5'4", maybe 140 pounds. He wanted to be an athlete, but he was just too small to do anything. I can't think of really anyone else among NFL teams who had somebody like this being the color analyst of their games. I don't think we'll find anyone who's like him going forward. It's hard to think of people looking backward. And if somebody else does emerge like this, that person will be a complete original as well, because Myron, he was one of a kind. There is nobody else remotely like him.
It also feels like he was genuine, right? I mean, in a world of manufactured personalities these days, right? I mean, yes. I don't think you could have this. This could not have come out of a laboratory.
Oh no. He was the opposite of sort of the broadcasting school type of announcer. He was very, very. He let fly whatever he was thinking, and although unlike a lot of today's sports broadcasters, he never used foul language. He was unfailingly polite, as he might rip into a player's, a dumb player or something like that, but he was very polite about it. Funny. And and he would cut the guy, so to speak, but he wasn't vulgar or mean, even, really. He was just incisive, as somebody told me, incisive and funny. Yeah, like I said, I don't think there's anybody else like him.
And a Pittsburgh legend for sure.
Oh yes, he's. I think he will be remembered as long as there is a Pittsburgh Steelers football team. Uh, he was one of the founding fathers of Steeler Nation. He really bonded the audience to the team, and he created a lot of the culture that surrounds the Steelers. We didn't mention this before. He was the one who introduced the term immaculate reception on the 11 o'clock news the night of Franco Harris's catch in the 72 playoffs. Of course, he created the towel. He created so many nicknames. He made Steeler games. It's special. Well, more special, I dare say, than other NFL teams. Yeah, it feels that way to the fans, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and listening to those clips, seeing them, I'm kind of jealous. I grew up a New York Giants football fan, a little dalliance with the Jets, and moved to Chicago eventually. And you long for some of these personalities that came along with the game, not necessarily to get in the way of the game, but to kind of add some spice, some life to it, right? I mean, the closest thing I can think of being, not a native of Chicago was the late great Harry Carey, right? I mean, you kind of, to me, it was a revelation to listen to those broadcasts and baseball, obviously, lots of time to fill. But it made it. I'd go out of my way to listen to a game because you never know what he was going to say. Bob Uecker, maybe in Milwaukee, same thing. It feels to me like he sort of fits into that, and then some. And I think it's actually less obvious or less voluminous, these kinds of personalities in NFL game broadcasts over the decades.
Yeah, baseball, because you have time, baseball allows an announcer to showcase his personality more so than football does. Because football, you have like 10 seconds. You have 30 seconds between plays. You don't have much time to unwind a story the way that Bob Uecker could, or Vin Scully, or Harry Carey. So Myron was unique in the world of football that way. I mean, I'm sure there are others out there, but it is hard to think of people who helped forge such a bond between a city and a team, and has such a lasting impact years after his death. Harry Callis maybe would be a reasonable comparison. Nobody else is leaping to mind in the football world anyway.
Yeah, but Callis is like the broadcaster guy, right? He's the voice of God, took over from Facenda. This is a different guy, right? This is these
yeah. Oh yes,
people, yeah.
Myron was not the voice of God. He was like a barking schnauzer, as Roy Blunt, the sports writer, once described him. He was like a yapping kind of dog type of broadcaster.
All right, a hearty double yoy and a wave of the terrible towel in the general direction of Dan for that wonderful conversation. I learned a ton, and you will too, even more, with this great book. I highly recommend it. It is called, again, Behind the Yoy, The Life of Myron Cope, legendary Pittsburgh Steelers broadcaster. It is published by our friends at the University of Nebraska Press. It is available now, as they say, wherever good books are found. If you happen to be in the Pittsburgh area, why not walk on over to the Waterworks Mall, the Barnes & Noble there on Freeport Road. And on November 16th at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you can meet Dan along with Elizabeth Cope as they sign copies of the new book. That is just tremendous. And tell him that you heard us on this show. Why don't you? And maybe he'll inscribe it a little specially for you. I don't know. I can't guarantee it. And I don't know if it's going to be worth anything more. But the book is great. I'm sure you will enjoy meeting Dan and hearing some anecdotes from him. And as they say, you'll be glad you did. If you don't happen to be lucky enough to live in the Pittsburgh area, why don't you go online to the official Myron Cope channel on YouTube that Dan is putting together. It is it's an ongoing buffet, if you will. More stuff being loaded up there every couple of days. If you've never experienced the craziness and the uniqueness of the voice and the stylings of Myron Cope, boy, you're in for a treat there. Again, it's the official Myron Cope channel right there on the YouTube. While you're online, visit us, why don't you, at goodseatsstillavailable.com. All of our previous episodes are there. We've got a merch section there with great T-shirts and uniforms and other logo wear from various teams and leagues that don't exist anymore. Real fun stuff to be had and found there. On the socials, you can find us at Good Seats Still. That's our Twitter X handle, at Good Seats Still. And just about everywhere else on the socials, we're at Good Seats Still Available, all one word. You can send us email. We're at hello@goodseatsstillavailable.com. And let's see. We want to thank, of course, Jerry Payne Audio Excellence. I can't say it, but he does it, and he does it for us very well each and every week. We appreciate your services again, as always, this week, Jer. Thank you. And let's send you out, shall we, with a little Myron Cope music. Yeah, well, he was a musician, you say? Well, not really, but he very much indulged in various takeoffs and of music and that kind of stuff. And here's a real humdinger, and with all due respect and apologies to the one-hit wonder that is and was Billy Ray Cyrus. Here's Myron Cope doing his version of Achy Breaky Heart. It was a Steelers terrible towel spoof. And my apologies. Take care. Have a good week. Bye.
Well, get out your towel, your terrible, terrible towel. The Steelers gonna play a playoff game. So get out your towel, your terrible, terrible towel. This time will never, ever be the same. Please tell your ma and do tell your pa to put on their TV in Arkansas. They'll see them towels a-flying, they'll break down and start a-crying, 'cause they're missing fun that almost breaks the law. Don't tell your heart, your achy, breaky heart, the towel's coming back with miracles. The news will give him a start, he'll go crazy and fall apart and buy every other towel at the Kmart. You can tell your brother Cliff if he ain't drunk himself stiff, might just as well inform your Aunt Louise. Tell her grab a towel, please, mighty handy, she got a sneeze, but get her on, remember to remember. But don't tell your heart, your achy, breaky heart, the towel's coming back with miracles. You can't trust your heart, your achy, breaky heart. He'd get riled up and pass a little gas. Just get out a towel, and just any old towel, so long as it's yellow, gold, or black, or anything. Don't tell your heart, your achy, breaky heart, the Towin Steelers gonna beat 'em half to death. Brother Mose Cope here for your listening and dancing pleasure.